So good afternoon. No, thank you very much for the organizers, and just I'm very happy to be invited here and to hear like this kind of debate. So interesting. The goal of my intervention is to share with you some philosophical reflections about medicine from an orientation perhaps atypical for many of the participants of this symposium, because my research is framed within the ecological humanities. It's part of a collective effort to try to use the tools of the humanities to interpret this health crisis and in general, the ecological crisis from an ecosocial perspective. A broad consensus has indicated that SARS-CoV-2, the virus causing the current global pandemic of COVID-19, has its origin in a viral zoonosis originating in bats and then transmitted through other mammals, probably pangolins to humans. COVID-19 will therefore be an emergent infection that, like 70% of those that have appeared in the last 40 years, has spread to human populations through zoonosis. Infectious diseases caused by bacteria, viruses, fungi, or parasites that are transmitted from animals to humans. Now, has this confirmation of the animal origins of COVID-19 led to a reformulation of our notions of health, disease, and cure to include the rest of living beings? And will this global pandemic cause Western medicine to make a 360 turnaround, as suggested, for example, by Hinchcliffe, Manderson, and Moore in their article of last April that they call Planetary Health Publics After COVID-19? Does not the media and scientific omnipresence acquired by the search for and spread of vaccines seem to confirm the opposite hypothesis? In my intervention, I will try to approach these questions from three different angles. First, I will show how from its origins, Western medicine, influenced by the imaginaries of modern science, has had many difficulties in including in its notion of disease and cure factors beyond direct cause and effect, relationships with the human body. Second, I will illustrate that this mechanistic consensus that has dominated the biomedical paradigm has been slowly but steadily cracking from at last half a century for a variety of reasons. Among them, I will highlight two: the increasing role that zoonosis and other ecological determinants of health play in public health problems, but also the extent and burden of health systems increasingly constituted by non-communicable diseases, NCDs that we were discussing before. And third and last point in my talk, it will be presenting the proposal of an ecological medicine, following the formulation of Caroline Raffensperger, in my opinion, the only one capable of guaranteeing a planetary health and allowing us to successfully face what Susan L. Prescott and Alan C. Logan have called the Anthropocene syndrome, of which I think COVID-19 is actually a symptom. There is strong historical consensus that identifies the 16th and 17th centuries as a turning point in the economic, political, and imaginary structures of the European world. When I speak of imaginaries, I'm referring to the set of representations, affections, intentions that condition what the society thinks about itself and its environment, what is considered possible and impossible, real or unreal. It's a bit similar to cosmovision, It's not that far away. These imaginaries were described with remarkable analytical depth by Greek-French philosopher Cornelius Castoriadis in works such as The Imaginary Institution of Society. Important changes brought about by the birth of what has come to be known as modernity, inseparable from the rise of capitalism, was the profound transformation of the relationship with nature as perceived by our societies. As Caroline Merchant shows in her book, The Death of Nature, from the 16th century onwards, nature ceased to be identified with the maternal figure and to be understood as a living organic being, and became instead an inert entity that could be described by mechanical metaphors. This transformation was parallel to and resulted from the hegemonization of an atomistic and individualistic epistemological paradigm. For the new modern science, knowing became being able to describe isolated parts and then discover the laws that related them and gave rise to the behavior of more complex aggregates. This mechanical imaginary also colonized the description and study of the human body. As Kiko Klee studied in her book, The Philosophical Foundations of Modern Medicine, the mechanical imaginary transformed both the idea and the practice of medicine, which went from being an integral art to becoming a systematic and empirical knowledge with an anatomical basis. The profound relationship between mechanism and medicine already appears clearly in one of the fathers of the modern imaginary, René Descartes. In his book, Le Traité de l'Homme, he tried to explain bodily functions according to mechanical laws. For him, the human body was essentially a machine that functioned like a watch or a highly perfected robot. The human machine was also inhabited by a soul, which, apart from generating voluntary movements, had not connection with bodily operation. For sure, the research program derived from the mechanical paradigm has been enormous practical success, beginning with the discovery of the circulation of the blood by Servet and Hervey. In the Western biomedicine, heir to the mechanical paradigm, the body has been seen as physical structure in which illnesses are explained by single rational predictable causes mediated by molecular mechanisms or mechanical dysfunction. This is why surgery and the use of drugs, both claiming to be able to identify an illness and to treat it by means of a single appropriate means, physical or chemical, have become the two hegemonic forms of treatment. The centrality of the use of drugs has also been, or medicines, has also been strongly driven by the creation and development of a pharmaceutical industry that has found in health an enormously lucrative niche of capitalist accumulation. The possibility of obtaining profits depends, in the first place, of the massive consumption of medicines by a large part of the population, and as a preliminary step, on the pathologization of the maximum number of human situations and ailments. Secondly, the pharmaceutical industry requires a well-oiled research structure that allows the constant discovery of new patents and treatments. This last pandemic year has clearly shown that this biomedical model is still in very good shape. This is evidenced by the fact that the public debate on how to deal with COVID-19 has been dominated, still in Spain, mainly by ventilators, mechanical means of assisted respiration, and vaccines, a techno-scientific response of the pharmaceutical industry to the disease. Never, as in the COVID-19 crisis, have we been able to see more clearly the power and social centrality of an industry that, bypassing much of its usual protocols, has been able to produce, distribute, and market several treatments against the disease in record time. Anyway, the narrowly biomedical approach to the concept of health, which reduces to the absence of pathologies, has been questioned for at least 50 years. In fact, when the World Health Organization defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity in 1947, it was already explicitly pointing out the importance of going beyond biomedical notions to include psychological and social factors in the practice of medicine. Despite this, in 1958, Hannah C. Selvin coined the idea of ecological fallacy, which has been reinforcing for decades the idea that social factors do not play a relevant role in the definition of disease or cure. Moreover, the fact that as late as 1977, George Engel, an internist and psychiatrist, felt compelled to propose a paradigm that accounted for interactions and more biological, psychological, social, and cultural factors, which he called the Biosicolosocial Paradigm, shows that even then, the definition of the World Health Organization had not been fully assimilated. We had to wait until the 90s, and especially the 21st century, for the environment to the concerns of medical thought, especially public health. The last 20 years has seen a veritable explosion of proposals and typologies aimed at connecting human health and environment. On the one hand, because multifactorial, lifestyle-driven, non-communicable diseases, NCDs, that are responsible for 38 million deaths annually, were proven to be largely unresponsive to single-agent cures and or biotechnical preventatives. Autoimmune conditions, allergic diseases, asthma, cancer, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neuropsychiatric disorders, or obesity are diseases inseparable from our lifestyle and therefore highly sensitive to economic inequality, political exclusion, or diet. Advocates of lifestyle medicine or bio-psycho-ecological models already understand that neither the person nor his or his health conditions can be fully understood without viewing the environment as part of a dynamic system of which all people, health conditions, and the environment are integral parts. On the other hand, because there is a growing awareness that behind the most pressing contemporary public health problems, including COVID-19, there are abundant ecological determinants. To cite a few examples, higher mean of global temperatures can lead to increased waterborne, foodborne, and vector-borne diseases. Climate change, drought, desertification, flooding can have subsequent effects on crop failure and other food productions, as well as food, vector, and waterborne diseases. And for sure, zoonosis had to be understood as health threats imposed by human-animal ecosystems interface. Although it has been the COVID-19 disease that has brought these processes to the forefront, there are many other present and future threats linked to this process. A non-exhaustive list of these include waterborne diseases, for example, hepatitis A virus or salmonella or cholera, foodborne diseases, E. coli, vector-borne diseases transmitted by insects or other arthropods, for example, the West Nile fever, tick-borne encephalitis, malaria, dengue fever, antimicrobial resistance in pathogens, and others than COVID-19 airborne diseases such as Middle East respiratory syndrome, coronavirus, and avian influenza. It is not surprising, therefore, that ideas such as conservation medicine, One Health, eco-health, health ecology, ecotoxicology, or public health ecology are beginning to proliferate. Although all of them are of interest and are making decisive contributions to key problems, in most of their proposals, nature remains a factor capable of having effect on human health, but essentially external and different. They reproduce the profound ontological abyss between nature and humanity that was opened by modern thought. That's why I will close my intervention by outlining a proposal that tries to think in a holistic manner, pointing the foundational interrelationship existing between the health of humans and the whole of life in our living planet, what it's now called Gaia for some researchers. So the same Hinchcliffe, Manderson, and Moore that I talked in the beginning, among others, have forcefully stated that this pandemic invites us to completely change our notions of health, disease, and treatment. Why? Because the usual fixes to outbreaks of infectious diseases, surveillance, pharmaceutical measurements, and non-pharmaceutical measures will be insufficient now and in the future. We need to include all the life on the planet as a crucial factor in understanding, defining, and treating disease. We also need to understand human and non-human animals' bodies as complex, interrelated biological systems embedded in dynamic environments. One approach that is trying to give shape to this orientation is what has come to be known as planetary health, which has become especially popular thanks to the highly cited 2015 Keystone Report by the Rockefeller Lancet Commission on Planetary Health. This expansive document, which conveys political, economic, and social systems, formally define planetary health as the health of human civilization and the state of the natural system on which it depends, with its stated goal to find solutions to health risks posed by our poor stewardship of our planet. From this perspective, it is crucial to understand that nature is not simply an external factor with variable impacts on health, but that there is a profound interrelationship between all living beings that we know better and better thanks to the Gaia theory, which shows us that symbiosis is much more widespread than we have usually thought. Moreover, following Lynn Margulis, we should understand even ourselves more as holobionts than as absolutely isolated individuals. A good example of that is the microbiome in our organism. The term microbiome refers to microbes and their collective functional genomes operating within an ecological niche. Microbiome science has illuminated the value of mutualism in sustaining life. In humans, the beneficence of microbes include protection against pathogens, enhanced nutrient absorption, maintaining gut, skin, and other barriers to the outside environment, reducing the burden of potentially harmful environment chemicals, for example, xenobiotics, and the manufacture of various chemicals which support survival. In addition, and of vital importance, microbes educate the immune system in early life, that its interactions between microbes and the immune system prepare for appropriate responses to an ever-changing physical and mental environment. In fact, the cumulative explosives which may erode the diversity of the human microbiome in Western nations, and that includes psychological stress, westernized diet, consumption, circadian disruption, excess alcohol and tobacco use, late and environmental chemical exposure, or higher antibiotic prescriptions, are linked to a higher incidence of NCDs and also socioeconomically dependent, attacking more to disadvantaged individuals and communities. This has been described as the dysbiotic drift hypothesis. That is why, from this point of view, the objective of public health should be fighting against what the authors, Susan Prescott especially, have defined as Anthropocene syndrome, a complex of environmental degradation, biological annihilation in the form of species losses, NCDs epidemics, climate change, and today COVID-19 around the world. We need to deeply transform our way of relating to nature and develop a holistic and symbiotic point of view in which, as several authors have pointed out, the indigenous wisdom is called to play a crucial role. Actually, in my paper, I don't have time to go over it now. I see how actually now medicine is approaching both social ecology and ecological ethics. For example, ideas such as the loss of ecology of commoner. I will not go through it now. Anyway, a promising proposal on how to include these concerns and strategies within medicine is that of Caroline Raffensperger and her idea of ecological medicine. Continuing her long commitment to the definition, dissemination, and promotion of the precautionary principle, she has synthesized in 5 points the necessary change of approach that medicine needs nowadays. The first, prevent first, cure second. Treating symptoms is often late in the game. Preventing illnesses is both ethically responsible and medically preferable to curing them. The idea of taking action to prevent harm is called the precautionary principle, and it asks 3 questions. Is this harm preventable? Are there alternatives to the harmful activity, and has anybody looked? Do we know enough to act? The second point, it will be think locally. The widespread assumption that genes are more important than environment to understand disease have been put into question. Environmental differences have important health implications, including ecological and socioeconomical factors. Ecological medicine is a medicine of place. Its health and healing stories are located in space and time in our planet. Number 3, do no harm. The principle of no maleficence is taken further in ecological medicine. Do no harm to either the patients or to the planet. Healthcare should be rethink in order to reduce its environmental footprint and turn into ecologically sound practice. Reduce waste, toxic pharmaceuticals that remains in the water, etc. Number 4, create the conditions for health. Ecological medicine is not only refraining from doing harm, but taking positive actions to create the conditions for health. Restoration of the earth, cleaning up the air and water, biodiversity recovering, cutting emissions are providing an anchor for health. And number 5, heal the whole. Treating symptoms is the old medicine. Ecological medicine addresses root causes, even in the face of uncertainty. The old disciplines of public health and the new ideas in ecology must be merged with the practice of medicine to begin healing the whole and facing the Anthropocene syndrome. Healing the world is no longer optional. It is triage. It is emergency room medicine. If we want to be able to build a post-COVID world in which we don't only stop this pandemic and those to come, but also guarantee a planetary health, an indispensable condition for human health, it is time for us to make an interdisciplinary effort to implement this ecological medicine approach, learning from indigenous wisdom, social ecology, and ecological ethics. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening.